Good morning, and thanks for having me. So what I'd like to talk about today is the business of design, or in particular, kind of learning from the mistakes that I've made in growing and scaling a design business. And while my experience is focused on scale and growth, I'm hoping what I have to talk about will apply to all of you, whether you're a freelancer, just starting your own company, or trying to take it from 15 to 50 people. So as Robin said, typically, you walk away inspired. There's people that have very illustrious bios here, and they have an amazing creative work that they're going to show you. And you're going to walk away really inspired and have an insightful perspective. Well, I don't have any of that for you guys today. But what I do want to talk through is how do you get to the great work that we so often see? What really goes on behind the scenes? Really, how can I give you guys a framework to approach the business side that really then unburdens you of having to think about process and operations and spend more time on the work and on the ideas behind it? So first, a little background about me. I started out as a photographer. So for these that are freelancers here, I know firsthand of what it's like to hound clients for getting paid and trying to live from one project to the next. I then, by chance, met who is certainly illustrious, Brian Collins, that some of you may have heard of, founded a design firm called Collins. I joined them when we were still 4 people, and over the course of 6.5 years, we grew that to 50 people. And then most recently, I joined the New York Times, where I lead operations for their branded content and native advertising group. And that has grown from 40 people to about 160 in 4 years. I've worked with companies across a wide range of scale, from 4 people, where we invited our siblings or our friends to come and sit in the office whenever we had clients to look bigger than we really were, to incredibly large, where it's taken me months to learn everyone's name. I'm still trying to do that at the New York Times. And throughout it all, big to small, going from small to big, I've kind of had a simple metaphor that I've used to describe it. And in the beginning, when you start out, it's pretty straightforward. It's kind of like flying a kite. It's largely dependent upon you and a little bit of luck to get up and flying, and you're the one that's pulling all of the strings. And your focus is really on being able to pay the bills, to have incredibly happy clients, to be really proud of the work, and then to do it again and again and again. Because without that, there's no point to even look at scaling or growing. You're not thinking about legal issues, HR policies, employee retention, financial forecasting, employee compensation, IT, contracts, work-life balance, because your work is your life at this point. But as your business grows, it's easy to imagine that's still this same kite or multiple kites. You're still trying to pull all of the strings. But in reality, it's much more complex, and it's kind of like you found yourself in the cockpit of an airplane. And you have to figure out how to navigate this new machine. You have to figure out how to have the right specialist at the controls to make sure that you're able to focus on flying and they're able to focus on service and delivery, or making sure at the right altitude, and kind of adjusting it as you go. So with that set up, I'm going to jump right into kind of what I've learned not to do and kind of leave you all with some tips and areas to kind of focus and think about as you look to staff and grow your business. So, number 1, staffing to grow. For those of you in the room that have started your own company or are in the process of doing that right now, your job description probably looked something like mine did when I first started, which was you're the client lead, you're the project manager, you're the operations guru, you're the head of IT, you're the office manager, you're head of HR, you're a part-time financial manager, and you're a full-time therapist to your team. And one thing that took me far too long to realize is you kind of get comfortable and used to doing all of these things, but you really can't do everything. You can't attend every meeting, you can't review every deck, you can't approve every single client contract. And what I found myself doing was prioritizing the completely wrong things. I would be proofreading a deck rather than preparing for the client meeting and what I was going to say to them. I was compromising relationships and really marginalizing my own team by not letting them and empowering them to do their jobs. And what I learned is that there are people out there that do a far better job at a lot of those things I listed out than I ever could do. And when you start out, your entrepreneurial spirit is kind of what gets it off the ground. You have to do everything. You have to throw everything against the wall, see what sticks. But we're also inherently bad at multitasking. So you have to acknowledge that to evolve, you're going to need partners that can then focus on those areas that you're not so great at, which leads me to number 2 is when you're looking to scale, you need to hire people that are going to excel where you're weak. So what are you great at? Are you a visionary leader who can really inspire your team? Well, then you need to hire someone who's really good at tactics and executing on that vision. When I worked with Collins, that's why we were so great. Brian is a kind of magnanimous personality, and I'm much more comfortable sitting in the background making sure everything's running. It took me about 3 months to get ready to even come up here and talk to you guys. But also, if you're a strategic thinker, then get someone who is an out-of-the-box creative kind of luminary that can help kind of balance that with you. And then, once you've identified that you're not going to really do everything, and once you started to understand what you're great at and start to build those people out around you, what you also need to remember is that you should never outsource your core competencies. What I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. We had won a big piece of business for a international company. We didn't have a creative director to put on it, so we hired a freelance creative director. He led the client relationship. He worked with the clients. We had our full-time design staff working with him. After the project, the client hired the creative director and never worked with us again. So as you're looking to scale and grow, make sure that you're never outsourcing what is going to be a foundational element of your business. And I say that because what you're doing and building, relies upon your expertise, and you're sharing that expertise with somebody, and you're sharing those relationships, and you don't want those to just walk out and kind of take business with you. So the 4th piece here, and just a quick note, is that you have to embrace diversity. The quickest way to irrelevancy, especially in this industry, is if you have people that think like you, that approach problems like you, that come from the same background as you. When I was at Collins, we had 38% of our staff was international and on visas. We really embraced that thinking of, you're going to approach something a completely different way than I'm going to approach it, and that's vital to stay relevant in this industry. So ultimately, when you're looking to staff, it's really shifting from a me mentality into a we mentality. So now that you've started to expand your team, what do you do with them? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about your people. So our companies don't run on an algorithm, and we don't have an amazing product, and artificial intelligence isn't kind of knocking at the door to take away what we do every day. Our companies really run because of the company that we're able to keep, and how we keep that over the long term. So, your employees are your most valuable asset. And that this is probably going to be a cliche, but you're really nothing without your people, and your people are the ones that generate the revenue for your business and your company, which means your employees aren't expendable. At the start, I could attract great talent because they were just coming out of grad school. They could work 14 hours a day. It was a livable salary, but it wasn't great. It was still junior. And we didn't really have any benefits. 401k was a jumble of numbers and letters that no one knew what it meant. But they'd be part of a team, and they'd have great portfolio work. So, we grew, and I thought you could just continue to do the same thing. We added some people on. We started to expand. But then, I started to lose a couple of key team members. And I tried to figure out why. We're still doing great work. What's the difference? And I decided, let me talk to my employees. Let me see what they value. What are they looking for? And what I got back wasn't pay us more. What I got back was, what benefits can you offer us? How do we feel more like a team? I left a holding company so that we don't create these silos here. How do we make sure we're not doing that? It was so much beyond just the work and just compensation. So the first point on the people is that the type of employee you need to attract is going to shift over time. They're not all going to be young grad students. They're going to have husbands. They're going to have children. They're going to have a side hustle. And they're going to be more mature in their career experience. So as your business grows, you're increasingly going to be spending more time with more senior people on your client side too. So a CEO is going to want a peer, and that peer is going to be someone that is more mature and has more experience and can kind of hold that relationship. So understand that the type of employee you need is going to shift, which also means what you offer them needs to shift as well. You have to think about their future. This is everything from 401k to like mental health days to flexible arrangements for children. For those of you that are just starting out, benefits can seem kind of insurmountable and really expensive. So think about what you can do. Can you offer summer Fridays to everybody? Can you give them a week remote a year to work? Think about giving them something that is going to be competitive or beyond standard for the industry. So, at Collins, when I was there, we completely revamped all of our benefits. We made them beyond industry competitive. And while it cost us money that first year, I can guarantee that the long-term effects of that paid dividends far beyond that initial expense. So kind of building upon that too is show your employees a growth plan within your company. Show them that they have a path to grow with you. When an employee joins you, it's not a singular experience. That's actually just the very beginning of a journey that you want to bring them along with you as you grow and as you expand. Really sustained growth planning with your employees is actually shown to have a much higher retention rate than any sort of one-off rewards or incentive-based plan. This one's going to get a little more tactical, but create defined salary bands for all the roles within your company. Tell your team that you have defined salaries and don't have it be ad hoc. I'll never forget one time I had two employees, they're both designers, where one was compensated about 20% more than the other, and employees talk. And they found out, and they were really upset about it. Rightfully so, something I just hadn't even thought about. I was like, well, I can get this person for this price and this person for this price, and it's just that'll work. It doesn't work long term. And so it'll help you in negotiating salaries and raises and kind of stepping from one level to the next so that's predefined and it's not always a negotiation. But it'll also kind of create more transparency with your teams. And fifth point here is give your team active and frequent feedback. Years ago, I was a very poor manager. I would see things go wrong that I should have commented on, I didn't. And I wasn't only harming the company, I was actually kind of harming the employees' growth as well, because then they built bad behavior over and over. So, take 3 minutes at the end of a meeting or the end of an internal meeting or after a client meeting and just kind of say, hey, the way you delivered that was great, but you used like as a filler 14 times, and it's just not going to make you sound that smart. So focus on that next time. Goes a really long way, but it has to be genuine. So last point here is to be hard on the work, but easy on the people. We pride ourselves on what we create, and sometimes you're going to push your employees. And you got to make it about the business and not make it personal. So if we've definitely pushed employees to work 2, 3, 4 late nights. Give them a Friday off. Tell them to take a lunch with a family member or friend and bill it back to the company. So by focusing on those areas, over time, we started actually to build out and to regrow our team and kind of position it for sustained employee growth. So the third thing I want to chat about is your numbers. So the industry we work in is largely project-based and shifting more towards it every year. And so our biggest expense is also our human capital. So your ability to have a strong understanding of your finances is really imperative to grow and to kind of keep your staff year over year. So, in the beginning, my inability to focus and try to do everything led us to have increasing revenue growth, but I wasn't focusing on the macro financial picture. And so while revenue was growing, our profit was shrinking. To the point where at one point I realized that we had enough in our payroll account to go 2 more months, and then we didn't have any money left. And it was one of the most kind of frightening and intense 2 months that I had went through, but I used it to make sure that I never again got put in a compromising situation where I didn't have a handle on finances. So first point here is hire a finance manager, even if it's part-time, even if you're starting out and you're a freelancer, have someone look at your books once a month. And as you start to grow, have someone that comes in once a week, twice a week, and then hire full-time, because having a good handle on your books is going to be incredibly necessary as you grow and you add more people and have just more complexity. Which leads me to say, also review your company finances weekly. If you don't have a part-time finance manager, keep your eye on where the money is going, how much is coming in, how much is going out. Did a client defer payment? Did something get pushed into the next month? You need to know all of these things, but also as a founder or as a partner working on the business side, you may need to be the one to go hound a client, and that's going to be much more impactful coming from you than from a finance manager. So it helps to have a pulse on that. Number 3 is another tactical one, but make sure you have the right payment terms. In a project-based business, we're typically used to having 50% up front, 50% on the back end. But if you have a project lasting 3, 4, 5 months, you kind of have a gap in between where you're not getting any money. So one thing I recommend is really phase out your projects to just do like a monthly billing cycle so that you kind of treat your projects more like a retainer and you can project your cash flow. You don't have a huge sum coming in 1 month and then nothing for 2 months and it's pit in your stomach. So make sure that you have the right payment terms, then hold your clients to them, put them in your contracts. You often hear this with personal finance, but I think it's critical in a business setting too. Have at least 6 months of operating expenses in your company bank account. So if every single one of your clients left tomorrow, know that you have 6 months to keep your company running with your staff, with vendor payments. This gives you enough lead time to either land and get more clients, or if it gets dire, maybe you have to shift and cut some staff or shift your expenses. But having that runway is going to give you much more time to be strategic rather than just reacting. The 5th one here is don't use guessworks on pricing your projects. Have an actual pricing strategy. In the early days, I probably lost my company a lot of money on a lot of projects because we had the good old lick your finger and say, $20,000 for this one or $40,000 for this one. There was no science behind it, so we didn't really know how much it was costing. So I would say it doesn't have to be rigorous or some large complex framework. Just know how much your staff costs and know how much you're going to make off of a project before you start, which is getting to knowing your margins before you're beginning. What you want to know is that if you're taking on a project with a set timeline, set deliverables, you want to know that if the client asks for additional round of review, that you can actually say, we can't do it because we're not going to make money on this project. Or we'd be more than happy to do it, it's going to cost you this. Otherwise, what are we here for if not to at least also run a profitable business? The 7th point here, if you're going to do pitch work, know that you can afford it. So for some reason, clients love to come to us and say, we have no idea how you'd work with us. We have no idea what you're going to create, so just show us what you're going to do before we sign you on. And I firmly believe in not doing free work. Clients should pay for everything. And if we're asked to do spec work, we're either going to get paid for it or we're going to retain all of our rights and titles to it if we're not selected to go forward. So if you do abide by those two and you decide you want to do pitch work, know that you can afford it. Know that you're not sacrificing a paying client or another client that's going to come to you and want to pay full price without seeing work first. And the last point here is know when to say no. So there's a time and place for it, always. This could be if a client loves you and you're taking on more work, you may realize that you've gone from being strategic focused to being an executor, and all of a sudden, you've shifted in your client's mind of just doing execution work and not doing their strategic work. And it's all because they like you, but you didn't say no to focus on the projects that you needed to be working on. So focusing on these areas, over the time, we started to see our revenue continue to rise and our profitability to tack with it. The 4th area I want to talk about is your legal. This can be a dreaded L word for a lot of people. It's scary and complex, but it doesn't really have to be. And the first point of this is understand that everything is a negotiation. I used to receive MSAs from clients, and they would be complex. I just sign them and give them back. I was like, it's too scary. I don't want to do it. But we had really poor terms that we were agreeing to. We agreed to non-competes we shouldn't have. And so just know that everything you get from a client can be a negotiation. And I kind of focus on 3 key areas. There's your budget, there's your timing, and there's your deliverables. And I typically, say when you're working with clients, they can choose 2. If they want to have a lot of deliverables, well, then they're probably going to pay for it, and it's going to take a little bit of time. If they want to have a tight budget, well, then maybe the timing's going to take a little bit more, and we're going to scale back the deliverables. So just approach everything as a negotiation. Even as you're young, don't think that it just has to be a fixed accepting terms. Building on that is know exactly what you're signing over and what you're delivering. Don't give your clients right and title everything if you don't have the ability to do that or the right to do that. And as you're delivering things, understand which party is responsible to legally vet things. Typically in these scary MSAs, it says everything you give us is going to be perfectly cleared to use, and we can do whatever we want with it. But you typically want to try and push back and get your clients to vet things legally because they know where it's going to be used, and they know how they're going to use it much more than you. And this fourth point here, have a contract for everything and everyone. One lawsuit can bankrupt your company. So I don't care if it's your mother or your brother or your grandma or your husband or pizza delivery guy or the pizza delivery guy's cousin, have a contract. And if you're just starting out, there's a lot of free resources of independent contractor agreements that you can use just to protect yourself and to know that what you're receiving from them is going to be okay for your clients to use. So last section I want to talk about is your workflow. So I'll define this as how you work with each project. And lack of clarity in your working process not only creates isolated pain points, but they'll ripple across your entire company. So the first point here is have one point of contact with all of your client work. I used to confuse the hell out of my clients. I give them 4 people to talk to, and they'd ping pong back and forth, and no one knew who to talk to. I had a Fortune 500 client say, "We really love the work, but you're driving us crazy. We have no idea who to work with." So give your clients one person to talk to, and give your team one person to work with. Which also means you're going to communicate and then re-communicate. I get accused of talking too much by my staff, but I don't get accused of under-communicating. The ability for you to be able to speak openly and clearly with your team members and with your clients is crucial. Have weekly status meetings, communicate project status, send an agenda ahead of every client meeting, send a recap after every single one. If there's confusion, hop on the phone and talk about it. 90% of the issues that I've had with client work is that there's a lack of communication in what one party needs versus the other. The third point is to create a template approach for your projects. And this isn't to try and templatize your work or take the creativity out of it. It's just to say, create a phased approach for everything. If you create brand identities, have a discovery phase, a design phase, and then a rollout phase. And that allows your team to know exactly how you're working, but your clients know how you're working too. And it creates this shared language and process so that you're not kind of scratching your head every single time of where do I start again. Fourth point is getting a little tactical, but also conduct sunset meetings. These are typically called postmortems. I don't like that term. I like to call them sunsets. Where you actually take 30 minutes with your team after a project and talk about what went right and what went wrong. I do this. I have 3 questions I ask my team. I ask everyone that was involved in a project to tell me one thing they did wrong, one thing the team did right, and then one thing we should look at changing for next time. And it creates shared learnings. And the last point that I want to talk about is just knowing your resource plan before you begin. If you leave your resourcing up to guesswork, you're going to be strained. You're going to probably need to bring freelancers in. And you might end up having to outsource, one of your core competencies or key roles and lose a client because of it. So why did I talk through these things today? Well, ultimately, I want for each of you to focus on making incredible work and not having process or frameworks or operations be a burden, but rather be something that allows you to focus on making and creating so that you can go back to paying the bills, making your clients happy, and being really proud of your work. Thank you.